Welcome to the Culling the Quarters podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. This is Season 2, Episode 10. In this podcast, we explore the tapestry of paganism with its variety, warmth, and wisdom. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Britt Sandkulla-Sinclair, a woman who wears many hats, each contributing to her unique ability to guide others through life's transformative moments. Britt is a practicing witch, death doula, and astrologer who draws upon her diverse background to weave practical knowledge with a touch of magic, creating a powerful approach to personal and collective growth. As a death doula, Britt provides emotional, spiritual, and practical support to those nearing the end of life and their loved ones, helping them plan personalized end-of-life rituals, legacy projects, and final arrangements. Britt's expertise in astrology allows her to help clients gain a deeper understanding of themselves and navigate challenges. By interpreting the positions of the planets at the moment of birth, she provides insight into personality, relationships, and timing in their lives. Britt is also dedicated to fostering community through her work. She holds monthly women's circles aligned to the new moon, offering a space for women to connect with their intuition, inner wisdom, and each other. Additionally, she facilitates grief circles to create supportive environments for individuals processing loss. Whether you're seeking to understand yourself better, navigate loss, or simply explore the mysteries of life and death, Britt's insights and compassionate guidance can offer valuable support. Through this episode, we'll delve deeper into Britt's work and explore how she helps individuals and communicates meaning and purpose to life's tapestry. I'm going to take you now to my conversation with Britt Sandkulla-Sinclair. Welcome to the Calling the Quarters podcast. Today I'm very honored to be having on the program Britt Sandkulla-Sinclair, who is a witch and death doula. Britt, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Dean. Thank you for having me.
Now, for our listeners who don't know you or not aware of you, where are you from and where did you grow up?
Well, I live in Vallejo, California. I've been here for a little over 20 years. I grew up was born in Reno, Nevada, which is where my mom was from, but I grew up in Mendocino County in a very, very small town. So I kind of grew up between Mendocino and Reno, but I've been in the Bay Area for the past 35 years.
Were you raised growing up in any specific religion or faith?
No, not specifically. I mean, my dad's side of the family are Catholic, so I was baptized Catholic. It was just kind of like what you did. Um, and on my mom's side, my mom was, basic Christian. Like some were Presbyterian, some were, so it kind of crossed into different areas. There was religion around, but there was nothing that was very strict. My father passed away when I was 5, and that's when we left Mendocino County, although I still have very close ties there. And my mom did a lot of searching. She did some born again Christianity for a while, and nothing really seemed to stick with her. So I didn't have anything specific other than this idea of God, quote unquote, or, and heaven and hell was definitely represented. But no, I never did the Sunday school thing. It didn't really jive with me. They would find me out in the field at the end of class. So, and I think that, however, a lot of my family on both sides, I would say, are a little bit more strict. Like my mom was a little bit more open, but there definitely was some more strict religion on either side that is kind of carried through. There was some, bit of judgment there growing up.
At what point in your life did you become aware of witchcraft or paganism, whatever you want to call it? And what made you start thinking about it, or kind of like introduced you to it, where you started kind of thinking about it as something you might want to do?
So I would say in my teenage years, I had some exposure to Wicca through some older teenagers, and I was really intrigued by it. It didn't feel like a great fit at that time. I was pretty young. I would say I was like 12 or 13 years old. And I was really interested, but it was like, that seems like something I want to explore. But the people I was finding that was involved were, I'm not going to say intimidating, but didn't feel like I was going to really like jive with those people well. So I was aware of it, and it was always like really intriguing to continue to understand more. I kind of was brought to it as I got into my 20s. I realized I was searching for something, a place that felt like home. I searched through Christianity, Judaism. I was trying to learn as much as I could. And when I stumbled upon paganism, and witchcraft, I felt there was kind of this coming home feeling. This place, like this makes sense to me. So that's what opened up the world of witchcraft to me.
All right. And then also, I just wanted to kind of follow up with as you started looking into it, how did your practice evolve? How did it start changing over time as you started, you know, getting interested in it? Did you join any groups? Did you read any specific authors? Who influenced you the most?
So I was kind of looking through my relatively large library of the occult books, and a
Nice.
lot of the classic, Victor Cunningham and Raymond Buckland, and a lot of those classics, and then moving into like Grimoire of the Green Witch by Anne Mora, a lot of Ellen Dugan books. So I was just trying to gather as much as I could, and this is definitely, say, pre-Amazon days. It was like I didn't. Where do I go? Interestingly enough, when I moved to Vallejo, I was unknowingly about a block and a half away from the Red Raven, which was a
Oh, nice.
metaphysical shop. So as I was doing all these studies, I was looking like, where do I go? Where do I find supplies? Where do I like, what do I do? And I found the Red Raven, and I was like, you're literally a block away from my house. Like, how is that? So again, listening to the universe, right? Timing and how things come together. So I spent a lot of time at the Red Raven with Jeannie, Kathy, and Elaine, which was a tattoo shop on one side and a metaphysical shop on the other. And the cool thing is they're all very, I'd say, eclectic in their ways. They all follow different paths, or it's not very regimented. And I wasn't looking. The thing about like organized religions that have always gotten me is I don't like being told what to do, I guess.
Yeah.
So
No, I
I
think we all feel
really,
that way.
yeah, I wanted to be able to learn new things. And um, so I spent a ton of time there. I started going to full moons there. Got a lot of tattoos there. I just would go and just spend a lot of time learning about herbs, learning about, reading. They had a ton of books. So it was like I could just really dive in. And like I said, I was lucky they were a block away from my house. So especially after I had my first son, which, went through a naming ceremony with him there. Spent most of my maternity leave just hanging out there, reading, and just really kind of finding my humility in it also. So, and again, it wasn't a super organized group. One thing that I really enjoyed is that it wasn't super ceremonial or high mat. It was come here, come to the table, and feel the energies. And so that was really what kind of brought me into the group. I still practice with some folks that I met at the Red Raven. We get together on the Sabbaths and
Hmm.
have circle. My children are involved in that, and this is 20 years later. So I would say I'm basically a solitary witch for the most part. Most of my practice is solitary. I do have my family, especially during the pandemic. We did a lot, obviously, at home where we were really involved in creating that space because we were felt so cut off from the rest of the world. So it's like, how do we make sure we have that connection with the divine or whatever we to still feel connected to the world. But for the most part, I'm a solitary witch. And I would say for me, my practice evolved, especially as we kind of came into pandemic times. There was a change for me. I made a switch from out of my career, and I got up my coaching certificate. That's also when I really dove into my astrology studies and that connection between astrology and witchcraft like opened my mind and my heart and everything so much that it took my witchcraft further. I understood how to use astrology in my spell work, and suddenly spell work was a little bit more it was more enticing to me. I could really feel the intention work behind it. So it's evolved and just continued to get stronger over the years, which has been a really incredible thing. And now I find that I've got a very clear space in my community, as my friend refers to me as the resident witch, and our little shop that she has, a gift shop that we spend a lot of time in. I'm Vallejo's resident witch, according to her, which is, there's a lot of us here.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of different covens and groups in Vallejo slash Benicia.
Hmm.
It's really weird. I've talked to different people in different covens there. I always like jokingly say that you can't throw a rock without hitting a witch in that area. It's
It's
just
so
so,
true. It's so true. When the little bookshop opened years ago, at first she didn't have a lot of witchcraft books, of pagan books, and now that's like exploded for her. She's like, I didn't realize there were so many of you guys here. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of us here, and we don't have a lot of access. There aren't a lot of shops for us to go to come together and to get some of our crafts and supplies. So, in fact, I have a little witchy corner in my friend's shop where I do have um, candles and herbs and just basic kind of witchy supplies for folks to come in and get some exposure if they have any questions. Because I find there's a lot of people that are very curious, but they don't know how to ask. They don't know where to go. So I wanted to give people an opportunity to have that space. And that is also kind of goes hand in hand with the women's circles, the new moon women's circles that we do. And we perform them, we do them in that shop at the joint in downtown Vallejo.
now I want to digress on this if you don't mind, because
Yeah.
I really love this topic and I really think it's important. Places like Red Raven were such a wonderful thing to have in your life because if you live a life where you don't really know a lot of other pagans, or if you're kind of a solitary or something, being able to talk to other pagans is such a nice thing. And there are no community centers necessarily or churches for pagans. So I think for me, like coming to Red Reagan was really kind of healing because the people that owned it were very, very nice. They're always like, I'd come in and they'd offer me a cup of tea. They're always just very lovely. And they would talk shop, or they would, you could talk to them about tattoos or piercings and they would really knew what the hell they were talking about. It wasn't like an amateur production. They really knew their stuff and just smart, neat people. And being able to talk to others or other witches would come in and you could talk to people, recognize people and go, oh, I've seen you for years. I didn't know you were also a witch.
Yeah.
And that's kind of fun. Can you speak to that a little bit? What it's like, because you talk about your friend who has a shop, being able to go and kind of get that, what's the word I'm looking, I don't know, like kind of a
I think it's a
affirmation.
sense of community.
Yeah.
And one thing that, you can run into, especially when there's the reference like a baby witch. And there's a lot of people that, especially in the last 20 years, that have really gained interest in witchcraft and paganism. But there is sometimes a fair amount of gatekeeping as well. Um,
Yes.
and that's a challenge, right? I really want to encourage everyone to explore everything. That's how I came to where I'm at, is I wanted to open all the doors and see if there was anything on the other side that worked for me, that made sense. And places like the Red Raven, I could go and just ask questions. I didn't have to worry about knowing all the answers.
Yeah.
And even today, that helps me in a little bit more of, I would say, I've hit my kind of wise woman stage of life, that now I get asked a lot of questions, and not just from young folks, from all folks that are like, hey, I was been Catholic my whole life, and now I really have some questions. And so, can we talk? I don't have all the answers, and
Yeah.
I'm very comfortable with not having the answers, but let's explore those things together. Let's have conversation and a lack of judgment, right? Like, let's talk about the things that make you uncomfortable. That's okay too. I'm not here to, I'm not the judge. I'm just here to learn.
Well, I also like to talk a little bit about, at what did you come out to like your family at a certain point and say, this is who I am, I'm a witch? Like, were you able to be open with them about it? Like, I know in many cases, for me, for instance, I really couldn't talk to my parents about it. They just didn't really, they're like, they thought it was a phase. They thought I'm just being extra. People are often either they're vehemently opposed to it or they're just like, oh, that's just them being them kind of thing. How was it for you?
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, I think some of my family still thinks I'm in a phase. It's just been a really long one. Um, I don't know that there was ever a time that I just blatantly came out. Like, if it came up in conversation, I was never shy about sharing my views. Um, in my past, I would say I've been a bit more of a people pleaser. I didn't like to rock the boat. So I'm not going to go out of my way, especially with my family, to be, to push my views on. However, in my family, I was also kind of looked at as always the one that was different. So it was it wasn't unexpected that, oh, Britt's a witch. Okay, that doesn't, that, That makes sense. Sure. Um, More as time went on, like if you came into my house in my early days, it wouldn't have been obvious to you that I was a witch. It wasn't just all out in the open. There was a lot of altars, but they were very subtle. Now it's a little bit more obvious. I mean, it doesn't look like I didn't put my Halloween decorations away, but
Yeah.
it's it's pretty obvious um, that I'm a witch. In my family, I never really thought anything negative about it. However, at one point, and I think this is when I really had to kind of pick my lane. My stepfather, in innocence, asked me, "Well, why would you call yourself a pagan or a witch? That has such a negative connotation to it, like in society." And I had a visceral reaction to that question, like because that's what I am. And why would I pretend to be something different to please other people because it makes them uncomfortable? And at that point was kind of where I drew the line in the sand. Like, yes, I'm a witch. And if that makes you uncomfortable, that's not my problem. This is kind of a reclamation of that, whether we take back the word bitch or the word witch or other things that we can reclaim as ours and to change viewpoints. It's not my job to save the world or to change their viewpoints on paganism or witchcraft. Um, but I can definitely be myself and be authentic in who I am. And, especially like I said, as I hit my 40s, I began to care a lot less about rocking the boat and not so much like worried about other people's opinions. I definitely I'm a practical witch as well. So I kind of work and live in the land of woo in many cases, and keeping my feet on the ground is really important. Like I am skeptical of things. I work with a woman, Rachel. She's known as the skeptical shaman, and I love working with her because it's very like this is our experience. We don't hide. I've had some really interesting supernatural experiences in my life, and they're very real. And I can talk about those things as they are, and I find that people don't question that as much. Like I come to it with a real honesty, and yeah, so that's I think helped me. I've always been a person that I feel like I'm approachable, but I definitely have an energy around me of kind of don't mess with me in that way. Like,
Yeah.
and so I haven't had a lot of challenges with folks or being harassed or feeling that I've had issues around being a witch. I feel that that's a huge privilege for me because we live in a place where it's okay to be a witch, and there's still a lot of places in the world where it's not. So I've been
Yeah.
very fortunate in that regard.
What about with family? I know that I'm a parent who raised my son as a pagan, and in my relationships, I've dated different women, or he's even married different women who didn't share the faith or did. How has that affected kind of your nuclear family life, being a witch?
Um, my husband was raised by atheist parents, so he actually sought out some spiritual like community. I think he became a congregation Protestant as a teenager, just probably in a rebellious phase because his parents were like, "What? What is going on here?" Um, so he's kind of just he doesn't not share my views. He doesn't practice, like I said, I do a lot of solitary work, but he loves coming to circle and being with people of open-minded things. So it's actually worked really well, I guess, in that regard. It worked really well for our family. We've raised our children pagan, but also, my experience and what I wanted my own children to have is to make sure they're able to make their own choices. So, if anybody was ever like, "Hey, I want to go try out church," go. I'm not going to take you, but I can find someone that will take you if that's an interest to you. It hasn't really been an interest to them. I have one son that is very much into Norse paganism.
Oh, nice.
Our lineage is mostly Scandinavian, so that really resonated with him. All three of my teenage sons wear armbands, and that they got when they were 13. So yeah, it's actually really worked really well. I just have to make sure that when they go to certain things that they're careful about their opinions because they will tell you, like, let me tell you about the Easter Bunny, or let me tell you what, like, you know, get together, guys. You don't need to overshare. Um, Luckily, they've been really interested in learning things too, and they go through their phases of being really opinionated. But I've been fortunate in my nuclear family. Like, we celebrate Christmas, and we don't celebrate it for the religious reasons behind it. For us, it's a time with our extended family to come together and, you know, just enjoy the season and enjoy each other. And for my younger children, it was very much like, oh, presents. But Yule is a huge thing that we celebrate, and that is nuclear for us. That's with our
Yeah.
smaller groups. We exchange a small, like more of a token at that time. We talk about the importance of the seasons, and I think just living closer to nature and having my children understand that is really what I wanted to make sure they grew up with.
Going through your life as a pagan, as a witch, did you receive any kind of training specifically through the years that you were able to study certain things for bad or good that you kind of had that influenced how you were doing things?
Um, Not formally. I did find it over time there's a few groups that I would try to join, and it, it just didn't really resonate with me. Again, like I wouldn't identify as Wiccan, although there's a lot of things that I in my own practice that are very similar to being Wiccan. How I show up in the world, the energy I put out into it, trying not to harm any. Um, so no, I didn't really receive any formalized training. In fact, I think it held me back in the beginning because I was really concerned about doing things wrong, right? Like, what is the right
Yeah.
way? What is the wrong way?
Yeah.
And it took many years for me to understand that my connection to the divine, that there is no wrong way. I had to really understand how to tap in and go with my intuition or listen to what my heart was telling me. And even in my current practice and my current spell work, like I am not very regimented. Now, are all the elements represented on my altar? Yes. Do I call the quarters a certain way? Absolutely. Those are just part of my own practice. But no, I didn't really receive a formalized training. Again, I don't like being told what to do. I didn't even
Yeah.
realize that was my issue until later in life. I like guidelines though, so I ask lots of questions. And some things really like, yeah, that's something I can make part of my practice. I know the term eclectic witch is probably a little bit overused at this point, but I would definitely identify that's kind of how I've pulled my own practice together. I have taken from different things that really resonate and feel right for me, and stayed open to other things. I didn't used to work with deities very often. I've been working with goddesses in the last couple of years, and that's definitely changed my practice. And nobody taught me how to do that. I had to figure that one out on my own. Some of the work you see that says like, hey, this is how you work with a goddess. This is how you work. That didn't work for me. I had to find my own road.
I want to talk about that a little bit because I found in my own life I've had goddesses come to me and then not depending on where I was at with my own mental health space or my own kind of healing space. For you, how did this come for you, and what has it been like for the last couple of years?
In the last couple of years, I found, and I would say more like dark goddess work. So I work a lot with Hecate, and I think that as I moved into my work as a death doula and realizing that that was my calling, that like if you had asked me 5 years ago, would you be working in the death care industry? My answer would have been pretty solid no. Like that's not something that's interesting to me. Um, but it kept calling, and I had to finally listen. And so Hecate continued to show up, and she was knocking, and I was a little bit scared to answer that call because it felt like a lot. It felt like a big change for me. And when I did, um, finally kind of opened those doors, she and I've been working together a lot, and it's not been easy, but it's definitely been rewarding and allowed me to kind of embrace a path that I didn't realize I was on. I didn't even realize I was actually on this path until recently. So,
Can we talk about being a death doula a little bit, and what kind of training did you receive, and how has it kind of transformed your life now that you've been doing it for a little bit?
yeah, and it is newer for me. So, I would say the majority of the training that I received as a death doula is actually from my own experience. So, as I mentioned, my father died actually tragically and suddenly when I was a young child, but I have experienced a lot of death and loss throughout my life. And um, interestingly, that when my dad died, he knew he was going to die. So he died in a car accident. He just his intuition was very strong that he was not going to live, and his flame was going to burn out. So for about a year before he passed away, he was telling people he was going to die, myself included. Like, I'm not going to be here to watch you grow up. It's going to be fine. You're going to be okay. So when he died, I wasn't as surprised as everybody else, even though it was a shocking circumstance. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that it wasn't normal for people to know that they were going to die or to talk about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I learned that as I got older, like, oh, my relationship with death may be a little bit different than some other folks' relationship with death. When my mom passed away, and the 2 years of her illness, that was really the most impactful thing in my life. That was a life changing experience. And I did not want to grieve, and I did not want to feel. In fact, I numbed myself pretty good with red wine for about a year.
Yeah.
And when I got to the point where I realized I needed to cut the alcohol out of my life and open my heart up and start to feel where I was at, I then was on a path of I actually have a deep capacity to help people at this threshold. Um, and so I worked with a group called Death Wives for my certification, and worked with a woman named Eileen through my coaching school. She has this company called Befriending Death, and she does courses on just conversations, not death doula specific, but bringing people together to talk about death, to make sure what your healthcare directives look like. And that was like my entry into it. I was like, this death doula thing keeps coming up. I'm going to take this course and see what comes of it. I took that course and realized, like, oh, this is actually where I should be. I have a passion here. I have a passion for making sure that people um, get their healthcare directives, that tell their families what they want, that people have these conversations, that this is sacred work, that in our country, especially, we don't talk about death. Nobody wants to talk about it. Like, it's a taboo subject. It wasn't always like that. 50% of people die in hospitals. A lot of the reason that is because their families don't feel capable of taking care of them at home. That was not the case 3 generations ago. People died at home. They had home funerals. So I wanted to be part of that journey of people transitioning out and helping their families to understand what is happening, because it can be really scary and really hard to be a caregiver.
I think we've almost like consciously acknowledged that as a society, we don't really do grieving very well. We kind
No,
of are fucked up with it.
yeah,
Like we even like talk about it, I think, in popular culture and literature and TV shows. We even almost like recognize it because whenever you see a TV show or movie that talks about a funeral, it's not unlike in real life where you go to a funeral and you're just standing around with relatives and you'd have no idea what to say to anybody.
yeah, that's very true. I think we have just it's a really good friend of mine. She's very conscious in her not wanting to grieve. She doesn't like to tap into those feelings. So this has been a journey for her. She recently lost her mother, and she's very much like, I got to be done with this. I'm German. I have a month. We're done. Like, and that was, tongue in cheek, but that's very much like she doesn't like to tap into those emotions. And it really was like, that's just kind of how our society is. It's like, no, I'm good. I'm moving forward. But those things live inside of our body and they come out in other ways later. Like, if you ignore the grief, it doesn't go away. It just maybe stores itself in your hips, or maybe it's in your shoulders, or it comes out in other ways, losing your car keys, like physical ways, right? We have different ways that we grieve, and we don't always get a choice, or we numb them and we don't feel it. And that, but eventually you're going to have to figure out how to deal with that. You can delay grief for many years, but it never goes away, is my experience. She actually came up with a really good tool that something that I use in my grief circles as well, is she would start blowing bubbles. So every time that she was really upset, or felt uncomfortable, she would have this little thing of bubbles, and I would see her over in the corner blowing bubbles. And that was her way of creating space to change her mindset, or to, when you're blowing bubbles, you're doing something you can't help but feel good in a way. And it's also a time where you can kind of carve out that space of like, I'm not doing great right now, so I need to focus on this. And I thought it was really a beautiful way of a little portion of grieving. Like, and so when she's blowing bubbles, we knew to either give her the space or join in and blow our own bubbles and think about what we have going on in our life. I'm still grieving my mother. I've accepted that she's gone, but it can hit you at all different times. I may see a really beautiful bunch of sunflowers, and although I find joy in them, it clenches at my heart too, because that's a representation of my mom, and I miss her. You know.
Do you when you work with people, do you work with people as they're dying, or do you work with people, the families of the person who has died? Like, how does it work exactly?
So as a death doula, you can do all these different things. You can work with people like as they're dying, and be what's called like an 11th hour doula. So they're overnight, or during the day, or for that extended time. But as a doula, there's many different capacities. You can do legacy work. So you can work with a family, work with the dying, to do memorial type of things, listen to their stories. A lot of being a death doula is also education, not just for the dying person, but also for their families, like I mentioned before, so they understand what is happening. That it's a way to bring comfort. Not only do we have a hard time with grieving and just the idea of death, but death itself can be really scary. Like, what is happening? Can they not catch their breath? Like, just even the physical aspects of dying. So there's a lot of areas of being a death doula. It's not just, don't just show up in the 11th hour. You can work with somebody for as soon as they go into hospice. You can start working with somebody. And so there's a lot of variables, and you can also decide what services that you want to. I don't do a lot of 11th hour doulaship right now, because I do technically have a day job. So if I was to get a call at midnight, I'm not necessarily able to go and spend a day plus, right then. At some point, that might be part of the service that I offer. Now it's like a lot of education, and working more with the families beforehand, making sure they have healthcare and resources as well. It may be as simple as like, oh, we need someone to come in and help do some housekeeping. Okay, I can get you a resource for that, or a resource for financial planning. So it's really it's a person. When somebody dies, there's a lot of things you don't realize are going to happen. Like, how do I deal with getting death certificates? What is this with the funeral home? Like, they don't walk you through even the more practical parts of what happens when somebody passes away. So that can be the role of a death doula as well.
I don't know how to ask this question without it sounding stupid, so I'm just going to ask it.
Okay, fair enough.
Is it hard to be a death doula?
Yes, I think it's hard to, I mean, context, right? So it's not for everybody. I think
Yeah.
that, just like being a doctor or a midwife or a nurse especially is not for
Yeah.
everybody. That's
Yeah.
hard work. Um, you know, as I look at, my views as being a witch and being pagan, I was actually just looking over at my book, The Pagan Book of Living and Dying. I have, views on death and dying that are very much, rebirth, and it's this natural cycle, and things come to an end. And because of what I've gone through in my life, and the unfinished stories that people have left for me to carry on into my own, weave into my own life, um, I have a capacity to be there for folks, to listen, to I'm not there to provide all the answers, but you don't have to walk down the path by yourself. I can walk with you. I can't fix things. I can't
Right.
fix that you've lost this loved one, or that you have gotten a terminal disease and that you have to come to an acceptance with that. I can't fix those things, but you don't have to be alone on that path. So yes, and luckily, because of my practices, I have ways of letting go of other people's stuff. That doesn't mean that I don't care or feel deeply for everybody that I work with, but I do have the capacity to let it flow through me, and return to where it needs to go.
I know this question is maybe too general because, obviously this is a specific thing that is different for everybody, but do you have any general advice for anybody who's going through grief or loss currently and is struggling to deal with it?
Um, I think when you're going through grief and losses, one thing is to give yourself permission to grieve, permission to not be okay on certain times, and to go through all those different emotions that may come up, and not to hold back or pretend that you're okay if you're not. And if it's been an extended period of time, like over a year, that you really don't feel like you're doing well, then get some help. Seek some help. The thing about grief is it is not linear. It is a spiral. It will come, it will hit you at different times. And knowing that that's all part of it, that's okay. That's I think that honoring what you have lost. Now, grief can come in many different ways. It's not just the loss of a person. Sometimes it can be the loss of a job or a relationship. Sometimes a loss of your own identity in some ways.
Yeah.
I grieved not just the loss of my mother when she died, but I grieved this identity and image that I held of myself through her eyes,
Yeah.
and had to make that transition. So it's not limited to, and it can be loss of a pet. It's just so many situations. Allow yourself the permission to feel what you feel and express it. Find places that feel safe to express that, and you know, just know that things. I just say like time heals. It's not so much that it heals; it just allows the energy to shift. And like the 5 stages or 7 stages. I've seen it both ways of grief. Weren't actually written for the people that are grieving. They were actually written for the person that was dying. And those same stages actually apply to us, but they don't go from like shock. They don't go in a linear fashion, right?
Right. Right.
So allow things to come as they do, and talk. I would tell stories, honor, make an altar, find something, a creative outlet, but don't pretend it's not there.
Thank you. I want to talk about your work with astrology. Can you
Yeah.
speak with us a little bit about your work with astrology and basically also, talk a little bit about how you use astrology to, understand yourself better or your life path?
For sure. Well, astrology opened up so many different avenues for me, as far as especially being a witch. So, my mom had my chart done when I was born, when I was a baby. Although, again, my mom wasn't very much, we lived in Mendocino. It's very kind of a hippie-ish kind of place to be. She wasn't that. She wasn't a hippie, but I guess it
Yeah.
was pretty commonplace to get everybody's charts done. I stumbled upon my chart multiple times throughout my life and was just very overwhelmed. Like I knew I was a Libra. That's all I knew. And for a while, that was okay. When I found my chart a few years ago, I had done a little bit more work, and I was like, I really want to understand this. So I started to really dive into what is a natal chart? What does that all mean? And in my studies, I found there's so much, everything is all connected, right? This goes back to my witchcraft as well. When you go in to do spell work at different times, it's like, hey, if you're doing a spell work for money and abundance, maybe you want to, on Jupiter's hour, like where's the sun, where's the moon? That would get really overwhelming for me. My study in astrology really helped me go, oh, I get it now. And, every planet is named for a god or a goddess, and there's a mythology there. That's the energy of the planet. How do I start to incorporate this? It really opened my eyes to so many things, including myself, my children, my family, as I began to look at their charts and get to understand them a little bit better. Um, you can be one thing with your sun sign, but your rising sign and your moon sign, or if you have a lot of planets in a whole different sign, that was going to show up a lot in who you are. And what I love about astrology is it doesn't box you into one thing. You're not just a Libra or just a Gemini or just an Aquarius. It takes in all these contradictions and different parts that make up who you are as a human. And so that was what was really drawn me to astrology, and using it with clients. My like coaching clients were kind of like astro coaching clients. I would find that when I did coaching, I'd be like, wow, I wonder how much Capricorn you have in your chart. And I was like, oh, I should bring these together and find how that works. And it really works really well. Helps people to kind of get a better understanding of some of their natural ways of being. And yeah, I found it to be really helpful in my personal craft, understanding myself. I have a Scorpio rising. I was like, oh, that explains so much about me. There's a little darker part that wants to know the underneath, that can have a deep capacity for, Scorpios have a deep capacity for thinking on other people's stuff in a way. We have that resonates with me a lot. And as a Libra, I that resonate with that. I want justice. I don't like unfairness. I like harmony. I spent a lot of my years people pleasing. It really made sense and it works. So I love it.
Do you think we have a lot of misconceptions about astrology in our culture? 'Cause I wonder if, do you have to kind of re-educate people about astrology when you talk to them about this stuff? Because I think many people just, I grew up with the astrology in the Sunday, next to the comics in the
Yeah.
paper, and there would be, you know, different radio shows about it and stuff. But oftentimes I think it was, especially I grew up in the 70s, so there was a lot of pop culture associated with it. Do you
Yes.
think you have to re-educate people about it?
Sometimes, yes, for sure. I think a lot of people that come to me as clients have an interest already, so that they really just want to learn more. So I'm not necessarily having to re-educate them too much. If it comes up in regular conversation and people are like, oh, astrology is bullshit. If I choose to, I can spend some time re-educating. I don't always choose to engage because that's not my job to change people's minds about things either. It's like, all right, you don't like it, that's fine. Um, Astrology is ancient. It is ancient stuff. In fact, the church banned astrology because it was deemed close to God. So
Yeah.
there's something about that, right? There's just as like there's so many types of paganism and witchcraft, there's equally as many around astrology as well. Vedic astrology, medical astrology, Western astrology, predictive astrology. There's all different types. So, everybody is we also have, I guess, what you could call kind of like lazy astrology, like where you do just like, oh, well, Tauruses are always stubborn, or just those kind of
Yeah.
blanket kind of things. So yes, I think when I work with clients, a lot of times there'll be like an aha moment. Like I'm just reading what I see. I'm just saying like where your planets are at and just telling you what that might show up. And then you can have like, oh, yes, that is me. I understand that. This definitely and that's really one of the most fun parts for me with doing astrology, is when people have these kind of aha moments. And astrology isn't there to tell you who you are, but it does provide kind of a blueprint of what is your path of least resistance, right? Even if you have what would be considered a hard chart or hard aspects in your chart, um, that's still your path of least resistance. That's the energies when you've gone through life and you're like, in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and I do a chart reading with you, you these things, yes, I've had to work with resolution around that. It's usually very familiar to you. And
Yeah.
it's not to tell you who you are or what to do, but it does give you some ideas on some tools or what your tendencies might be. One of my kids, at one point was like, I can't do that because I have a Leo moon. And I was like, that doesn't work that way. But I appreciate that you know that you have a Leo moon, but just because you have a tendency to have something or part of your chart pushes you, this energy is normal, doesn't mean that you can't change that. That's the idea, is to use the tool, be like, that is my normal tendency. I don't necessarily want that, or want to show up that way. So I just find it just like, even the tarot, it's a tool that can really open your eyes to a lot of different things about yourself and also the people around you.
What's something about witchcraft, paganism now that you would have liked to have told, like, say, your 19-year-old self?
Um, I would say kind of what I referenced before is to trust yourself, to trust myself,
Yeah.
and to not seek out all the answers. Right? There is, if there was one way to know all the answers, the right or the wrong way of being, or what our purpose is here, if it was all written a certain way, then I'm sure we would have all figured it out. To trust my path and to listen more. Um, and I think that's what I would, don't get caught up. You don't have to be perfect. Perfection is not the goal. And I would say that in every aspect of my life. That's what I would tell my 19-year-old self. Perfection is not the goal. It's just, it's all going to be messy, and enjoy the mess, enjoy the ride. And that's for my witchcraft journey, my motherhood journey, my career life path. That's just for life in general. Just enjoy the ride as much as you can, because it's not, we're all a mix of light and dark. There's always good and bad. Sometimes people come and it's like, if you're a witch, don't you have all the answers? Absolutely not. I don't have all the answers. I don't have the perfect mix. Bad things happen sometimes. Sometimes it feels
Yeah.
like they happen and it pours. I luckily have tools that help me get through those things. I have meltdowns as well. And that's okay too. I give
Yeah.
myself some grace in that. There are days that I just, want to throw it all to the wind. But I do have practices that kind of help me come back and, put one foot in front of the other and rebuild. And for every deep loss, um, there's also the capacity for deep joy. I think that's the other thing, is duality is really, um, it's a real thing. We have the capacity to feel deep joy and deep sadness at the same time, even, and that's okay. Like, we can be sad and happy at the same time and allow ourselves to do that.
Britt, I've had a wonderful conversation with you. I want to thank you for being on the podcast, and thank you for talking with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed chatting with you. I'm glad you reached out.
And that wraps up my conversation with Britt Sandkulla-Sinclair. We explored her unique journey as a witch, death doula, and astrologer, and gained valuable insights into how astrology intersects with paganism and how we can deal with our own grief. Head over to the show notes for Britt's bio and links to connect with her on her website and social media. Next week, we'll be talking with witch, priestess, and author Irasanya Moon. Until then, stay curious and keep exploring the mystical.